It's the strategic dependence or mutual interdependence that is a characteristic of oligopolies that creates an incentive to collude. If my behavior impacts your behavior and your behavior impacts mine, isn't it just more efficient if we sit down together and discuss what we're going to do together? Well, the problem with this, of course, is that when businesses do this, they are trying to maximize their profits at the expense of consumer surplus. So from the government's perspective, we don't want this collusion, and we have laws against it. But we need to understand why this strategic dependence or mutual interdependence creates this incentive to collude. And then we need to figure out what to do about it. So we're going to recall game theory, which we discussed earlier this semester. And game theory really is like chess. It's about analyzing behavior due to this interdependence. So if I behave one way, what will you do? And if you behave one way, what will I do? Recognizing that we are rational, that we maximize the benefits given the constraints. So you'll recall from the beginning of this semester, we looked at the prisoner's dilemma with Boris and Natasha. So let's use the Boris and Natasha payoff matrix to see why there might be an incentive to collude. So if you recall, when we have a payoff matrix, we have decisions for two parties, and they are acting separately from each other, and in most of the time, they don't even know what the other person is going to do, right? So if we arrest Boris and Natasha for robbing a bank, we put them into two different rooms. We tell them whoever confesses gets to go free. But if nobody talks, you're both getting in trouble. So we've constructed this payoff matrix, and Boris has to decide if he's going to confess or not confess, and Natasha has to decide if she's going to confess or not confess. And she doesn't know what's happening with Boris in the other room. So she has to consider what's in her own best interest. Remember, we learned at the beginning of the semester that we all act in our own self-interest. We maximize the benefits given the constraints and costs. If Boris confesses, okay, Natasha has a choice. She can confess and get 5 years, or not confess and get 10 years. What's better for Natasha? Well, less is better, so Natasha will confess. What if instead Boris does not confess? Is it better for Natasha to confess, blame it all on Boris, and go free, or for Natasha to not confess? There's some circumstantial evidence, and she gets 2 years. Well, free is better than 2 years, so it's better for Natasha to confess if Boris does not. So you'll notice that Natasha is going to confess because that's the best outcome if Boris confesses and the best outcome if Boris does not. Well, Boris has a decision to make. What should he do? If Natasha confesses, Boris can confess and get 5 years or not confess and get 10. Well, 5 is better than 10. So if Natasha confesses, it's much better for Boris to also be confessing. If Natasha does not confess and Boris does confess, he can go free, blame it all on her. If Natasha does not confess and Boris does not confess, circumstantial evidence, he'll get 2 years. Free is better than 2 years. So it's better for Boris to confess if Natasha doesn't. It's better for Boris to confess if Natasha confesses. This outcome here is what we call the Nash equilibrium, and we talked about that earlier this semester. So the likely outcome is that Boris and Natasha will confess. And in fact, when we talked about this previous, we were looking at incentives. So we actually structure this payoff matrix in order to get them both to confess, right? So you can see that it was clearly a better outcome for both Boris and Natasha to confess regardless of what the other one did. What we want to look at now is the idea of collusion, which is collectively what's better off for the two of them combined. Notice that the best option collectively would be for them both to say nothing, because 2 years each is better than 5 years each. So there's an incentive to collude. If Natasha and Boris can get together before the bank robbery and say, hey, if we're arrested, I don't talk, you don't talk. We agree. Pinky swear. If they can collude, work together, then the optimal outcome for them collectively is better than where they would end up. This is true when it comes to businesses and oligopoly markets, that the outcome is better collectively if they work together. This creates an incentive for them to work together. But from a society perspective, we want businesses to compete in order to benefit the customer. So you can see from this game theory why there might be an incentive to collude. We can actually use game theory, and oligopolies and businesses who strategize use game theory in all of their decisions. Because of this strategic dependence or mutual interdependence, game theory helps you figure out the best outcome for you individually. We saw here the collective best outcome, but the Nash equilibrium is the individual best outcome, recognizing that the behavior of one impacts the behavior of another. So the Nash equilibrium was the best outcome for Boris given what Natasha might do, and the best outcome for Natasha given what Boris might do. But it wasn't the collectively best outcome. Well, if we're not colluding, so we're going to act independently, we can use game theory to help us figure out what individually is the best outcome. So let's suppose we have two companies. Here we have Dell and HP, and they're trying to make some strategic decisions for the company. They could cut prices, or HP is also looking at improving their marketing and design. So they're decisions that we need to know what both companies are deciding on and the impact that it has to the companies. All right, so let's suppose that HP decides to cut prices. If HP cuts prices, Dell could also cut prices and make $10 million in profit because the quantity they sell would increase, right? Lower quantity, lower price, people are willing and able to buy more. If instead Dell held its price and HP lowered it, well, then everybody would switch to buying HP at the cheaper price, and Dell would lose market share and it would lose $10 million. So what's a better outcome for Dell if HP cuts their prices? Well, if HP cuts their prices, it's better for Dell to cut their prices. Now, it's not guaranteed that HP is going to cut their prices. The other thing HP is considering is improving their marketing and design. So if HP revamps their products, Dell could cut prices, in which case they will lower price, quantity will increase, that will make them $5 million more, okay? But that means that the HP product is slightly better in terms of technology or the way it looks or feels. So that will impact Dell. If Dell decides to hold its price while HP improves the marketing and design, it's still the old price, it's still an old design. They lose $20 million where the customers go to HP. So what is better for Dell? To cut a price or hold a price if HP is going to improve their marketing and design? Well, it's better for them to lower the price. So what we see is that Dell is going to cut their price whether HP cuts their price or improves their marketing and design. Well, what about HP? HP has to think about what Dell might do. If Dell cuts its price, is it better for HP to also cut its price? So again, price goes down, quantity goes up, they both make a little bit more money. Or is it better for HP to improve their marketing and design so they're no longer competing solely based on price and they're able to increase their revenue by 20 million? Well, 20 million is better than 10. So they'd rather improve their marketing and design. What if instead Dell holds its price so they don't change the price? Well, HP could cut its price. It's now cheaper than Dell. So what happens is customers will buy from HP because it's cheaper. HP will make $20 million. If Dell decides to hold its price and HP decides to improve its marketing and design, then it is better technology, right? Newer, and more customers will flock to the newer design. HP will make $40 million. So what is better for HP to do? To cut their prices or improve marketing and design if Dell decides to hold their price? Well, it's better for HP to improve their marketing and design. So where's our Nash equilibrium? What will these companies do? Well, we found that Dell was going to cut the price regardless of whether HP cut or improved marketing and design. And we found that HP was going to improve marketing and design regardless of whether Dell cut its price or held its price. So what would be the Nash equilibrium would be that Dell would cut its price and HP would improve marketing and design. Because of the strategic dependence, mutual interdependence, Dell has to consider what HP is going to do when it makes its decision about cutting or holding prices. HP has to consider what Dell is going to do if HP cuts its price or improves its marketing and design. And so you can see that if we walk through the steps, if we use game theory, we identify that the outcome that is best for Dell is that they will cut prices. The outcome that is best for HP is that they will improve marketing and design. And that outcome is based on optimizing what's best for the individual company, given the choices the other company has to make. So we said that game theory is used for businesses to make decisions when there is that strategic dependence. And it is that strategic dependence that creates that incentive to collude. But it's also that strategic dependence that creates an incentive to cheat. So where we have anti-competitive practices, so for example, OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, that includes countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, they are not within Canada. So they are not subject to our anti-competition laws. They are not in the US, so they're not subject to the Sherman Antitrust Act. They can collude if they want to. So there's an incentive for these OPEC countries to collude, to get together and intentionally reduce oil production to drive up the price. But there's also an incentive for these countries to cheat on each other. And let's look at why using game theory. So here we have company A and company B, and they can choose to cheat on the deal or to comply. So let's suppose that we have a deal in place. So we have a collusive agreement that we're going to intentionally reduce the quantity to help drive up the price of oil. Now, company A has to make a decision. Should they stick to the agreement or should they cheat on the agreement by producing more oil? Company B has a similar decision. Should they stick to the agreement or should they cheat by producing more oil? So let's look at the decisions that have to be made. Let's assume that company A decides to cheat on the agreement. So they agree, they shake hands, we're all going to reduce our output to drive up the price. But then company A starts churning out more oil. Well, how does that impact company B? Well, if company B had stuck to the agreement, they had complied, then company B would have reduced their output while company A was increasing their output. So company A would be able to sell more product, and that would mean that company A would be able to make more money, and company B, who produced less, is going to lose $1 million. Now, if company A cheats, so they produce more, and company B cheats and they produce more, of course, the quantity increases, downward pressure on the price, and they lose out on the profit that would have come from the collusion. So if company A cheats, what is better for company B? to have company A cheat on them and steal away their market share by selling more oil when company B reduce theirs, or to cheat as well and to produce more oil, then at least they get to sell more even if it's not at a higher price. Well, what's better for company B is to cheat. What if instead company A stuck to the agreement, so they reduced their output? Too much lectures, too many videos today. I'm losing my voice. If company A sticks to the agreement, reduces their output to help drive up the price, and company B cheats, company B doesn't reduce their output, instead they produce more, then what happens is company B gets to sell a larger quantity, that quantity that company A would have produced and sold, and that means company B is going to make $5 million more. If instead, when company A stuck to the agreement, if company B also stuck to the agreement, then the two companies would have reduced their output, it would have driven up the price, and company B would have made $2 million from selling at a higher price. Well, which is better for company B, to comply or to cheat? It is better for company B to cheat. So when we look at the options, company B is better off cheating whether company A cheats or complies. Well, what about company A? If company B cheats, should company A cheat or comply? Well, if they both cheat, then the quantity increases, drives down the price, there's no gain in profit. If company B cheats, so they increase their output, and company A chose to reduce their output, then the problem is company B steals away the customers, and company A loses $1 million. So what's better for company A if company B cheats? It's better for company A to cheat. What if company B complies? They reduce their output. Then is it better for company A to stick to the agreement or to produce more? Well, if company B reduces their production, company A cheats on the deal and increases their production, company A steals customers away from B and makes $5 million. If company A sticks to the agreement, when company B sticks to the agreement, then they both produce less, drive up the price, and make $2 million. So what is better? For company A to cheat and make 5 or comply and make 2 when company B decides to stick to the agreement? Notice it's better for company A to cheat. So what is the Nash equilibrium? The Nash equilibrium is for both companies to cheat. So this mutual dependence, which we've illustrated here with this game theory, the strategic dependence, mutual interdependence, shows that while there is an incentive to collude, there's also an incentive to cheat on the deal. And that's why every time OPEC gets together and decides to reduce output, some country cheats on the deal and increases their production. So the intention of driving up the oil prices doesn't last very long because each individual country or member of OPEC is acting in their own self-interest. One year it'll be Saudi Arabia, one year it'll be Russia, who then increases their output to try to take advantage, and that pushes the downward pressure on the price. So while this strategic dependence creates an incentive to collude, it also creates an incentive to cheat on the agreements, and so these collusive agreements tend to break down. The more parties you have, the less trust you have, the less likely collusion is likely to stay or to work, because parties have an incentive to cheat on the deal and act in their own personal best interest rather than the collective best interest.